I had 30 seconds before the chocolate soufflé arrived at table 12 and Christina Capon murdered her own husband. 30 seconds to decide if I was going to do the stupidest thing I'd ever done, or live with watching a man die when I could have stopped it. The Gilded Lotus was never quiet, even on a Tuesday night. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over white linen tablecloths. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers. The air smelled like truffle oil, aged wine, and money, the kind of money that could buy silence, loyalty, or a bullet to the back of the head. I moved between tables in my formal waitress uniform, refilling water glasses with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. My reflection caught in the polished silver, a young black woman in a bow tie and vest, practically invisible to the people who mattered here. That invisibility had always been my protection. Tonight, it might be my death sentence. Hi there, welcome back. Drop a comment below, and let me know where you're tuning in from. I love seeing where my Sasha Passion Story family is around the world. Hit that subscribe button and like this video. I post new emotional, dramatic love stories every day, and you don't want to miss the next one. Now, let's dive back into the story. Table 12 sat in the corner, half hidden by a marble column and trailing ivy. The premium table. The one we reserved for people who didn't want to be seen but needed to be known. Park Kong-dae sat with his back to the wall, a habit I'd learned of men who had enemies. His sharp features and controlled stillness made him look like a blade dressed in an expensive suit. Everything about him was precise. The way he cut his steak, the way he listened to his wife speak, even the way he breathed. Controlled. Calculated. Dangerous. Across from him sat Christina Capon. She was the kind of beauty that belonged on magazine covers, honey-color hair falling in perfect waves, a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my yearly salary, and a smile that could melt glaciers. Her hand rested on his arm as she laughed at something he'd said, leaning in like she couldn't bear to be more than inches away from him. She looked like a woman in love. She wasn't. 15 minutes ago, I heard her confirm the kill order through the wine cellar wall. The wine cellar. 9:47 p.m. I'd gone down to retrieve a 1982 Bordeaux for table 12, Kong-dae's favorite, according to the notes the manager kept on VIP clients. The narrow stairs creaked under my feet. The air was cool and heavy with the smell of oak and fermenting grapes. That's when I heard her voice through the thin wall separating the cellar from the private phone alcove. Christina's voice. Cold. Clipped. Speaking in a mix of English and Italian. When the chocolate soufflé arrives at 10:15, that's your window. 2 shots, center mass. Marco has the south exit. Dimitri has the kitchen. No witnesses from the staff. Make it clean. My blood turned to ice. The bottle nearly slipped from my hands. She continued. He suspects nothing. The fool actually thinks I'm planning our anniversary trip to Tuscany. A pause. Then, no mistakes this time. I'm done playing the dutiful wife. The call ended. I heard the click of her heels walking away. Now I stood 5 feet from their table, the folded note burning a hole in my apron pocket, my entire body screaming at me to run. But I couldn't. Not when Maya's face flashed in my mind, my baby sister, 16 years old, fighting leukemia in a public hospital bed because we couldn't afford the experimental treatment that might actually save her life. Not when I'd spent my entire life being invisible, powerless, voiceless. Not when I could stop a murder from happening right in front of me. I looked at the clock on the far wall. 10:14 p.m. The chocolate soufflé would arrive in less than a minute. I took a breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked toward table 12. 20 minutes earlier, I'd been worried about whether my rent check would bounce. Now I was trying to remember how to breathe while listening to a woman order her husband's execution. The wine cellar stairs creaked under my feet as I descended into the cool darkness. Manager's orders. Table 12 wanted the 1982 Bordeaux, and apparently I was the only server he trusted not to grab the wrong vintage. I'd memorized the layout weeks ago, Third rack from the left, I leveled the bottles with the faded labels that cost more than my car. The air down here was thick with the smell of oak and fermenting grapes. Dim Edison bulbs cast weak yellow light across rows of bottles that stretched into shadow. I found the Bordeaux, ran my finger along the dusty label to confirm the year, and was about to head back upstairs when I heard her voice. Christina's voice. It came through the wall to my left, thin plaster separating the cellar from the private phone alcove near the restrooms. The alcove where wealthy patrons made deals they didn't want overheard at their tables. I should have left. Should have grabbed the bottle and walked away, kept my head down the way I always did. But something in her tone made me freeze. Cold. Clipped. Nothing like the warm, breathy laugh she'd been using with her husband 30 minutes ago. When the chocolate soufflé arrives at 10:15, that's your window. She was speaking in a mixture of English and Italian, the words switching mid-sentence. 2 shots, center mass. Marco has the south exit. Dimitri has the kitchen. No witnesses from the staff. Make it clean. The bottle nearly slipped from my hands. I pressed myself against the wine rack, heart hammering so loud I was certain she'd hear it through the wall. He suspects nothing, Christina continued, and I heard the smile in her voice now, sharp and satisfied. The fool actually thinks I'm planning our anniversary trip to Tuscany. He even asked if I'd prefer the villa in Florence or the coast. A pause. I couldn't hear the voice on the other end of the call, only her responses. No, the insurance alone is worth $20 million. Add the legitimate business holdings, the territories, the offshore accounts. Another pause. Yes, I'm aware of the risk. That's why you're being paid what you're being paid. Don't insult me by questioning my nerve. My legs had gone numb. I was hearing a murder plot. An actual, real-time assassination order for the man currently sitting upstairs cutting his steak with surgical precision. No mistakes this time, Christina said, her voice dropping lower. I'm done playing the dutiful wife. After tonight, everything he built becomes mine. The call ended. I heard the sharp click of her heels on marble, the sound fading as she walked back toward the dining room. I stood alone in the wine cellar, clutching a bottle of wine worth more than my monthly salary, trying to process what I'd just heard. I should go to the police. The thought came and died in the same breath. Police? For people like Park Kang-dae? The man owned half the judges in Cook County. Even if I found an honest cop, and that was a big if, by the time anyone took a waitress's words seriously enough to investigate, Kang-dae would be dead and Christina would be on a plane to somewhere without extradition treaties. I could just do nothing. Walk upstairs, deliver the wine, serve the soufflé, and watch a man die. It wasn't my world. Wasn't my business. These people, mobsters, criminals, whatever they were, they'd chosen this life. But Maya hadn't chosen anything. She was 16 years old with leukemia and a wait list for a clinical trial we couldn't afford. She was innocent. She deserved every day I could give her. If I interfered, if I made myself visible, I'd become a target. They'd come for me. For Maya. If I did nothing, I'd have to live with watching someone die when I could have stopped it. The wine bottle felt impossibly heavy in my hands. I thought about my sister's face, pale against hospital pillows. I thought about the experimental treatment that offered a 40% survival rate, 40% more than she had now. I thought about the impossibility of everything I was holding in my head. And I made my choice. I grabbed a cocktail napkin from the prep station at the base of the stairs and pulled a pen from my apron. My handwriting came out shaky, desperate. Your wife sold you out. Quick, follow me. Trust me or die in 8 minutes. Your waitress. Simple. Direct. Probably insane. I folded the note into a tight square, tucked it into my palm, and climbed the stairs back into the golden light of the dining room. Table 12 was exactly where I'd left it. Christina was touching Kang-dae's hand, her face the picture of devotion. He was listening to something she was saying, his expression unreadable. I had 8 minutes before the soufflé arrived. 8 minutes before everything changed. The walk from the wine cellar to table 12 felt like crossing a minefield blindfolded. Every step was measured, deliberate, my server's mask locked firmly in place even as my pulse hammered against my throat. The note burned in my palm, folded so tightly the edges cut into my skin. Around me, the restaurant hummed with its usual Tuesday evening rhythm. The soft clink of silverware against china, murmured conversations, the gentle jazz that made everything feel civilized and safe. It was all a lie. I approached table 12 with the Bordeaux cradled against my forearm, the way I'd been trained. Professional. Invisible. Just another piece of the scenery serving people who never really saw me. Christina was mid-sentence, telling Kongdae something about a charity auction. Her hand rested possessively on his wrist, diamonds glittering under the chandelier light. She barely glanced at me as I arrived. "Your 1982 Bordeaux, sir." My voice came out steady. Years of swallowing my own fear had taught me how to sound calm when I was anything but. Kongdae gave a slight nod, still listening to his wife. I began the ritual, showing him the label, waiting for his approval, uncorking the bottle with movements I could perform in my sleep. The whole time, the note was pressed between my palm and the bottle's base. I poured for Christina first. Protocol. Ladies first, even when the lady in question was planning a murder. Then I moved to Kongdae's side. This was it. The moment that would either save his life or end mine. I poured slowly, the wine dark as blood in the crystal glass. As I set the bottle down on the table, I slipped the note beneath the edge of his bread plate with my left hand, a movement smooth enough to look like I was adjusting the place setting. Then I let my trembling fingers brush against the back of his hand. It was a deliberate break in protocol. Servers at the Gilded Lotus never touch the guests. Never. Kongdae's eyes flicked up to meet mine for the first time all evening. The calculation in his gaze was instant and absolute. I saw him register the touch, the tremor in my fingers, the barely contained terror in my face. In that single second, he understood that something was catastrophically wrong. I stepped back, hands clasped in front of me, and waited. He reached for his wine glass with his right hand while his left moved casually to adjust his napkin. His fingers found the note. He palmed it without looking, brought it to his lap beneath the table edge, and unfolded it with movements so subtle I almost missed them myself. I watched his face. Nothing changed. Not a flicker. Not a twitch. He might have been reading his phone or adjusting his watch for all the reaction he showed. But his stillness deepened, becoming something predatory. He set down his wine glass with careful precision, his eyes moving across the dining room in a sweep that looked casual but wasn't. I knew what he was seeing now because I'd seen it too, the two men in dark suits sitting separately near the south exit, not eating, just watching. The server near the kitchen entrance who'd appeared 20 minutes ago and wasn't on tonight's schedule. The way the normal flow of the restaurant had shifted slightly, like water moving around stones. Christina was still talking about the charity auction, something about a sculpture she wanted to bid on. Kongdae turned to her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Darling, I'm getting a headache. Would you mind if we left early?" The change in Christina's expression lasted less than a second, annoyance flashing across her beautiful features, then something sharper. Fear. Her hand tightened on his wrist. "A headache? You never get headaches." Her voice was light, concerned, but I heard the edge beneath it. "Are you sure? We haven't even had dessert yet. You love their chocolate soufflé." "I'm sure." He was already signaling for the check, his movements casual but irreversible. "We can come back next week." Next week. After she thought he'd be dead. Christina's smile had frozen on her face. Her eyes darted to the men by the south exit, then to the kitchen, then back to her husband. I saw the moment she realized something had gone wrong. Her grip on his wrist became desperate. "Kongdae, please. Just stay for dessert. It's already ordered. 10 more minutes. 10 minutes. 10:15, the window she'd specified for the kill. I don't think so, he said and stood. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I felt it, the shift from civilized dinner to something violent and inevitable. The men by the south exit tensed. The fake server's hand moved toward his jacket. Kongdae's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist with crushing force. You, he said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. You spilled wine on my wife's dress. Show me where I can help her clean it. Now. There was no wine on Christina's dress. Everyone at nearby tables looked confused. But I understood. He was giving us a reason to move. A reason for me to lead him somewhere. Away from the trap that was about to spring shut. Of course, sir. I'm so sorry. Right this way. My voice shook, but I turned toward the kitchen. Toward the only exit I knew that might save us both. Behind us, Christina stood frozen at table 12, her perfect mask finally cracking as she watched her carefully orchestrated murder unravel in real time. We made it 3 steps toward the kitchen before the world exploded. The first gunshot was so loud in the enclosed space that I felt it in my chest before I heard it. The mirror behind the bar shattered, raining glass across the mahogany. Someone screamed. Then everyone was screaming. Kongdae's grip on my wrist tightened to the point of pain as he yanked me forward, using his body as a shield between me and the dining room. We crashed through the kitchen door just as a second shot punched through the wood where my head had been a moment before. The kitchen was chaotic. Chefs looked up from their stations, confused, as we burst through. Behind us, more gunfire erupted. Rapid, professional, the sound of people who knew what they were doing. I heard Christina shouting something in Italian, her voice high and panicked. Back exit, Kongdae snapped, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Now. This way. I started to say, but movement caught my eye. 2 men in server uniforms, the fake ones I'd noticed earlier, came through the kitchen's second entrance, the one that led from the prep area. They weren't pretending anymore. Their trays hit the floor, and their hands came up holding weapons that looked military, purposeful, nothing like the handguns you saw in movies. Time did something strange. Slowed down and sped up simultaneously. The nearest gunman, Marco, Christina had called him Marco, raised his weapon toward Kongdae. I saw his fingers start to squeeze the trigger. Saw the calculation in his eyes that said he'd done this before, and we were already dead. I moved on pure instinct. My hand shot out and grabbed the handle of the stock pot on the stove beside me, the massive one Chef Rodriguez used for the French onion soup base, the one that had been simmering for hours. Boiling hot. Heavy. I swung it with every ounce of strength I had. The pot connected with Marco's gun arm just as he fired. The shot went wild, punching into the ceiling. Boiling stock, onions, beef bones, scalding liquid, erupted across his face and chest. His scream was inhuman. Kongdae moved like violence given form. He was on the second gunman before I even registered the movement, one hand striking the man's wrist so hard I heard bone crack. The gun clattered to the tile floor. Kongdae caught it before it landed, spun, and put 2 rounds into Marco, who was still clawing at his burned face. The sound was deafening. The kitchen staff scattered, running for any exit they could find. More gunmen poured through the main entrance, 3, 4, I lost count. The kitchen erupted into a war zone. Kongdae moved between the prep stations with lethal precision, using the industrial equipment as cover, firing with the controlled calm of someone who'd done this too many times to count. A bullet struck the mixer beside my head, sending shrapnel into my cheek. I felt the sting, the warm trickle of blood, but couldn't process it. Couldn't process any of this. Move! Kongdae grabbed me again, physically hauling me toward the back of the kitchen as he fired behind us. Where's the exit? Dry storage, I gasped, pointing toward the narrow corridor past the walk-in freezer. There's a loading dock. A gunman appeared in our path, emerging from the pantry. Young. Couldn't have been more than 25. His gun came up. I was still holding the stock pot handle. Without thinking, I swung the empty pot like a club. It connected with his skull with a hollow, sickening sound.
He dropped.
Kongdae stared at me for half a second, something like respect flashing across his face. Then the overhead lights exploded in a shower of sparks as more bullets tore through the kitchen. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Steam poured from a ruptured pipe. The fire suppression system activated, drenching us in chemical spray. Through the chaos, I heard Christina's voice, distant but clear. "Find them. I want them both dead." Kongdae grabbed my hand, not my wrist this time, my hand, and we ran. Past the dish station where Miguel was huddled under the industrial sink. Past the prep tables now covered in broken glass and blood. Past the walk-in freezer with its heavy door swinging open. The loading dock corridor stretched ahead, dark and narrow, our only chance. Behind us, footsteps thundered. Shouts in multiple languages. The distinctive click of magazines being loaded. We hit the corridor at full speed, Kongdae keeping himself between me and the pursuers. His suit jacket was torn, blood soaking through the white shirt beneath, his or someone else's, I couldn't tell. My chef's clogs slipped on the wet floor. I went down hard, knees cracking against tile. Kongdae didn't hesitate. He hauled me up with one arm, the other still holding the gun, and we crashed through the emergency exit into the freezing Chicago night. Alarms blared. The door slammed shut behind us, automatic locks engaging. For 3 seconds, there was silence except for our ragged breathing and the distant wail of sirens. Then the door buckled as someone hit it from the other side and we ran again. The loading dock was a dead end. I realized at the moment we burst through the emergency exit into the narrow alley behind the Gilded Lotus. Chain link fence to the left.
Brick wall to the right.
And directly ahead, the loading dock bay doors, all locked down for the night because Marcus, the lazy night manager, never bothered unlocking them unless there was an actual delivery. Shit, I gasped, spinning around. Behind us, the emergency door shuttered as someone hit it from the inside. The automatic locks would hold for maybe 30 seconds. Kongdae's gun came up, aimed at the door, his breathing controlled despite the sprint. Blood soaked through his white shirt, spreading from his left shoulder. How many other exits?
1.
Maybe. I was already moving, pulling him toward the service entrance half hidden behind the dumpsters. Maintenance access. Go to the basement. Show me. The door was unlocked, another gift from Marcus's negligence. We plunged into darkness, and I fumbled for the light switch I knew was somewhere on the right wall. Found it. Fluorescent tubes flickered to life, illuminating concrete stairs descending into the building's guts. Behind us, the emergency exit finally gave way with a crash of metal. We took the stairs 3 at a time, my hand gripping the cold metal railing. The basement was exactly as I remembered, a maze of narrow corridors lined with ancient pipes, electrical boxes, and storage rooms that hadn't been opened in years. The air smelled like mildew and rust. This way. I led him left, then right, past the boiler room with its constant mechanical heartbeat. My shoes squeaked on the concrete. Kongdae moved like a ghost beside me, silent despite his injury. Footsteps echoed above us. Multiple sets. They'd figured out where we'd gone. The freezer passage, I whispered, pulling him toward a service door. Connects to the dry storage on the other side. We can. A figure stepped out from behind the industrial water heater. A woman. Mid-30s. Black tactical gear. Gun already raised and aimed. Not at Kongdae. At me. She said you might have a rat helping you. The woman said, her accent thick, Eastern European, maybe Russian. Her smile was cold. Didn't expect the rat to be wearing a bow tie. I froze. The gun was pointed directly at my chest, close enough that she couldn't miss. My mind went blank, pure animal terror drowning out everything else. Kongdae moved. One moment he was beside me. The next he was between us, his body a wall, his gun coming up in the same fluid motion. 2 shots. Loud as thunder in the enclosed space. The woman's expression shifted from confidence to shock. She looked down at the red spreading across her chest, then back up at Kangdae. Her gun clattered to the concrete. She followed it down a second later. My ears rang. I couldn't hear anything except a high-pitched whine. Kangdae turned to face me, and I saw the blood on his shirt had spread further. His face was pale under the fluorescent lights, jaw tight with pain. You know another way out? His voice cut through the ringing. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The woman's body lay between us and the freezer passage. There was so much blood. Brenda. His hand gripped my shoulder, forcing me to look at him instead of the corpse. Another way out.
Now. Yes.
The maintenance tunnel. I forced my legs to move, stepping around the body, trying not to look. It connects to the parking garage 2 buildings over. The old elevator shaft, they converted it when they renovated. Only staff knows about it. Then move. We ran deeper into the basement, the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind us. I led him through the labyrinth I'd learned during my first month working here, past the storage room where we kept the extra linens, past the electrical room with its warning signs, to the far corner where a rusted door marked "Authorized personnel only" stood half open. The maintenance tunnel beyond was barely wide enough for one person. We had to move single file, Kangdae behind me now, his breathing harsh in the darkness. Water dripped from somewhere above. The tunnel smelled like decades of neglect. My phone flashlight illuminated rough concrete walls and ancient pipes running along the ceiling. We moved as quickly as we dared, my hand trailing along the wall for balance. Behind us, I heard voices echoing. They'd found the basement entrance. How far? Kangdae asked. 200 feet, maybe less. There's a ladder at the end that goes up to the parking garage sublevel. A gunshot ricocheted off the concrete wall behind us, impossibly loud. Stone chips exploded near my head. Faster, Kangdae growled. I ran, feet pounding on concrete, lungs burning. The tunnel seemed to stretch forever. Then I saw it, the metal ladder bolted to the wall, leading up to a circular hatch in the ceiling. There. I grabbed the ladder rungs and started climbing. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost lost my grip. Kangdae was right behind me, one hand on the ladder, the other still holding his gun. The hatch was heavy, rusted. I pushed with both hands, shoulder against the metal. It didn't budge. It stuck. Kangdae reached past me, added his strength to mine. The hatch groaned, then gave way with a shriek of metal on metal. Cold air rushed in. I hauled myself up into the parking garage, reaching back to help pull Kangdae through. He collapsed against a concrete pillar, his face gray, the blood loss finally catching up to him. Behind us, the voices in the tunnel were getting closer. We need a car, I said. Kangdae pulled out his phone with a blood-slicked hand and pressed a single button. Already coming. The SUV appeared less than 90 seconds after Kangdae made the call, a black Escalade with tinted windows that materialized from the garage's upper level like a predator answering a summons. The driver didn't speak, just threw open the rear door as we stumbled toward it. I collapsed into the leather seat, my legs finally giving out. Kangdae slid in beside me, still moving with that controlled precision despite the blood loss. The door slammed. The locks engaged with a heavy thunk that sounded like a vault closing. We were moving before I could catch my breath. The driver navigated the parking garage exit with professional speed, emerging onto a side street I didn't recognize. Chicago rushed past the windows, streetlights, late-night traffic, people walking home from bars with no idea that someone had just tried to murder a man over chocolate souffle. Kangdae was on his phone, speaking rapid Korean. His voice was clipped, authoritative, despite the pallor of his face and the blood seeping through his jacket. I caught enough of his tone to understand he was mobilizing something. Forces. Resources.
Va.
I sat frozen, staring at my hands. They were covered in blood, some of it mine from the cut on my cheek, most of it not. My bow tie hung askew. My white shirt was splattered with red and streaked with cooking oil. I smelled like stock and gunpowder and fear. 20 minutes ago, I'd been a waitress. Now I was what? An accomplice? A witness? A dead woman walking? The SUV turned onto Lake Shore Drive, and I watched the dark expanse of Lake Michigan stretch beside us, infinite and indifferent. Kongdae ended one call and immediately placed another. Then another. His organizational machine was already in motion. We pulled up to a glass high-rise in Streeterville, the kind of building where units started at $3 million. The SUV descended into a private underground entrance, passing through security gates that required 3 separate clearances. Armed men in suits were stationed at every checkpoint, their eyes tracking our vehicle with professional vigilance. The elevator required a keycard and fingerprint scan. We rode up in silence, Kongdae's breathing shallow, my own heart still hammering from the adrenaline that was beginning to curdle into nausea. The penthouse doors opened directly into his apartment. No hallway, no neighbors. Just a space. It was a fortress dressed as luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, but I recognized bulletproof glass when I saw it. Security monitors lined one wall of the entrance, showing feeds from what looked like dozens of cameras. 2 more armed men stood inside, nodding respectfully as Kongdae entered. One of them immediately moved to help him with his jacket, examining the shoulder wound with practiced efficiency. A medic, I realized. They'd been expecting us. "Sir, you need stitches." Later. Kongdae's voice was steel. His eyes found me, still standing in the doorway, still covered in blood. "Take her to the guest room. Get her clean clothes. She doesn't leave this floor." The trap was already closing. I felt it in the careful way they guided me down a hallway, in the locked doors we passed, in the weight of eyes tracking my every movement. A woman appeared, older, professional, carrying a first aid kit and a bundle of clothes. She led me to a bedroom that was larger than my entire apartment. Marble bathroom. Walk-in closet. Windows that didn't open. "Showers through there," she said quietly. "Leave your uniform outside the door. I'll tend to that cut when you're done." She left. The door clicked shut. I didn't hear a lock, but I knew it was there. I stood alone in the silent room, shaking. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the full weight of what had happened. People had died. I'd helped kill them. I'd thrown boiling stock on a man's face. I'd watched Kongdae shoot a woman in the chest and stepped over her body without hesitation. I made it to the bathroom before I vomited. 20 minutes later, I emerged in clothes that fit too well, someone had known my size, to find Kongdae waiting in the living room. He'd changed shirts. His shoulder was bandaged. His face was still pale, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. "Sit," he said. Not an invitation. A command. I sat on the edge of a leather sofa that probably cost more than my car. He stood by the windows, backlit by the city lights, looking like exactly what he was, a man who commanded empires and expected obedience. "You saved my life tonight," he said, his voice cold as the winter air outside. "That makes you valuable. It also makes you a target. Christina won't stop. She'll come for you. For anyone connected to what happened." "I know." My voice came out steadier than I expected.
No.
"You don't." He turned to face me fully. "But you're about to learn. My people have already secured your sister. As of 30 minutes ago, Maya was transferred from Northwestern Memorial to a private medical facility in Evanston. Armed security. The best oncologists in the country. The experimental trial she needed? Approved. Funded. She starts tomorrow." The world tilted. "What?" "Your sister is my responsibility now." His eyes held mine, and I saw no warmth there. Only calculation. The treatment that would have cost you $300,000 over 2 years? I own that access, Brenda. I own the facility. I own the doctors. I own the security keeping her alive. Understanding crashed down like a physical weight. You're blackmailing me. I'm protecting you both. And ensuring your cooperation. He moved closer, each step deliberate. You stay alive and useful. Maya gets the best care in the world. You become a liability if you run, if you talk, if you do anything that threatens my interests. That funding disappears. Along with the security keeping her safe from Christina's people. Rage and helplessness warred in my chest. He'd saved my sister's life and imprisoned us both in the same breath. I didn't ask for this, I whispered. You asked for it when you passed me that note. His voice softened slightly, but the steel beneath remained. You chose to see me, Brenda. To be visible. Now you live with the consequences. The trap had closed completely. And somewhere in Evanston, my baby sister was sleeping under armed guard, her life suspended on strings this man controlled. I looked up at Park Kong-dae, the man I'd saved, the man who now owned me, and made the only choice I had left. What do you need me to do? I woke to sunlight streaming through bulletproof glass and the disorienting sensation of not knowing where I was. The events of the previous night crashed back in fragments. Gunfire, blood, the trap closing around me. I sat up too quickly, and my body screamed in protest. Every muscle ached. The cut on my cheek throbbed. My hands were bandaged, though I didn't remember anyone doing it. The clock on the nightstand read 9:47 a.m. I'd slept for nearly 10 hours. I found Kong-dae in what I assumed was his office, a room lined with dark wood and leather, dominated by a desk that looked like it cost more than my yearly salary. He sat surrounded by screens showing security footage, intelligence reports, documents in Korean and English. His shoulder was freshly bandaged, and he'd traded the bloodstained suit for a black shirt that made him look even more like the dangerous man he was. He glanced up as I entered, his expression unreadable. You're awake. You can't just buy people's lives. The words came out before I could stop them, moral outrage giving me a courage I probably didn't deserve. You can't just take control of everything and expect. I already did. He cut me off, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. Your sister would have died in 6 months. The public hospital's wait list for that trial? 43 people ahead of her. By the time her turn came, if it came, the cancer would have metastasized beyond treatment. The clinical precision of it hit me like a punch. You don't know that.
Ido.
I read her file last night. He turned one of the screens toward me, and I saw Maya's medical records displayed in brutal detail. Stage 3 acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Aggressive. The experimental CAR T-cell therapy was her only real chance. Now she's receiving it. She'll live, Brenda. Hate me if you want, but that's the truth. I wanted to rage at him, wanted to throw his calculated pragmatism back in his face. But the words died in my throat because he was right. Maya had been dying, and I'd been helpless to stop it. You made a choice at that table, Kong-dae continued, something almost like respect in his eyes. You chose to act instead of staying invisible. You chose to save someone's life, knowing it would cost you everything. That choice led here. To this room. To this moment. Own it. I stood there, trembling with anger and helplessness, and the terrible understanding that he was offering me the only thing I actually wanted, Maya's survival, wrapped in chains I couldn't break. Anger wouldn't save us. Moral outrage was a luxury I couldn't afford. So, I shifted tactics. Christina had at least 3 people on the restaurant staff, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. One of the sous chefs, I don't know his name, but he started 2 months ago, same time she started coming in regularly. Always worked the nights she was there. And there's a server, blonde, mid-20s, works the private dining room. She was watching her table all night. Kong-dae's eyes sharpened. Go on. The wine cellar phone alcove has thin walls. I've heard conversations before, bits and pieces. People think service staff don't listen, don't remember. We're invisible until someone needs their water refilled. I moved closer to his desk, the intelligence analyst in me awakening. I've been working at the Gilded Lotus for 8 months. I know who comes in with who. I know the patterns, the relationships, the people who shouldn't be talking to each other but are. You're observant. It wasn't a question. I'm a black woman in a white tablecloth restaurant. I learned to be observant to survive. I met his gaze directly. You want intelligence on Christina's network? On who might be compromised? I can give you that. But I want something in return. You're negotiating? There was genuine surprise in his voice now. I already own the leverage. You own Maya's treatment. But you need information to win this war, and I have it. I forced steel into my voice. So here's my offer. I give you everything I know about Christina's contacts, the staff at the Gilded Lotus, the patterns I've observed over months of service. I become your asset, your source for how invisible people move through elite spaces, what we see that you don't. And in return? Supervised visits to Maya. Daily, if possible. And training. I saw his eyebrow raise. If I'm trapped in your world, if I'm a target now, then I'm going to learn how not to die in it. You teach me to survive. Weapons. Strategy. Whatever I need to not be helpless the next time someone points a gun at me. Kongdae leaned back in his chair, studying me with that calculating gaze. You want me to train you? I want to not be dead weight. I want to be useful enough that killing me becomes more trouble than keeping me alive. My hands clenched, and I want to see my sister without armed guards deciding if I'm allowed. Silence stretched between us. Outside, the city hummed with ordinary life. People going to work, drinking coffee, living in a world where they didn't have to bargain with criminals for their sister's survival. You have a survivor's instinct, Kongdae said finally. Most people in your position would still be crying or trying to run. You're negotiating. Most people don't have 16-year-old sisters with leukemia. I held his gaze. Do we have a deal? He stood, moving around the desk with that controlled grace that spoke of violence always held in check. He extended his hand. We have a deal. You provide intelligence. I provide training and access to your sister. But understand this. The moment you become more liability than asset, this arrangement ends. I took his hand. His grip was firm, still slightly warm from the fever of his healing wound. If I'm trapped in this, I said, voice hard with new resolve, then I'm going to learn how not to die in it. Something like approval flickered across his face. Then let's begin. 3 months can reshape a person in ways years of ordinary life never could. The first week, my hands shook every time I held a gun. The weight felt wrong, the power of it terrifying. Kongdae stood behind me at the private shooting range in his building's sublevel, his voice patient as he corrected my stance. Breathe. Squeeze, don't pull. Your target doesn't care about your fear. By the second week, my hands stopped shaking. By the fourth, I could hit center mass at 20 yards. By the 8th week, I could field strip and reassemble a Glock 19 in under a minute while Kongdae timed me. Again, he'd say, faster. In the field, you won't have light or time or calm. The hand-to-hand combat was worse. He didn't go easy on me. Couldn't afford to, he said. I collected bruises like badges, learned to fall without breaking, to strike without hesitation. My body, soft from years of carrying trays and pouring wine, hardened into something more dangerous. But the real education came in the quiet moments between the violence. I visited Maya every other day, always with one of Kongdae's men shadowing me. Watched my sister's color return, her laughter come back, the experimental treatment performing miracles the public hospital never could have provided. She asked questions I deflected. Where was I working now? Why the security? Why couldn't she come home yet? Soon, I promised, hating the lie. Just a bit longer. The truth was more complicated. Home didn't exist anymore. I lived in Kangdae's guest room, trained in his facilities, ate meals his chef prepared. My old apartment sat empty, rent paid by accounts I didn't control. My old life had evaporated the moment I passed that note. Kangdae taught me the deadly politics of his world during long evenings in his office. How territory worked, who owed favors to whom. The delicate balance of power that kept Chicago from erupting into open war. Christina had vanished after the restaurant, gone to ground with her remaining allies, but her network was still active, still dangerous. "She's patient," he said one night, showing me surveillance photos. "She'll wait for the perfect moment to strike again. That's what makes her dangerous." I studied the photos. Christina in various locations, always surrounded by security, always one step ahead of his people. "She underestimated you once. She won't make that mistake again."
No.
"But she'll underestimate you." He looked at me with that calculating gaze that had become familiar. "That's your advantage. You're still invisible to people like her." A waitress, someone beneath notice, was invisible, I corrected. "I'm not sure what I am anymore." The dynamic between us had shifted in ways I couldn't quite name. In the beginning, it was purely transactional, captor and captive bound by necessity. But somewhere between the shooting lessons and the late-night strategy sessions, I'd started to see beyond his cold exterior. I saw the weight he carried, the betrayal by his wife that cut deeper than any bullet, the constant vigilance required to maintain his empire. The loneliness of a man who couldn't trust anyone because trust had tried to kill him. And he saw me differently too. Not as a pawn or an asset, but as someone with unique value. During debriefings, he listened intently when I explained how service workers moved through elite spaces, what we noticed, how being invisible gave us access to secrets the powerful thought were hidden. "You see everything they don't," he said once. "That's worth more than any weapon." It was during a combat training session in the 10th week that something shifted irreversibly. We were sparring, a drill we'd done dozens of times. But this time, when I swept his leg and he went down, he took me with him. We hit the mat hard, my body pinned beneath his, both of us breathing hard from exertion. For a moment, neither of us moved. His face was inches from mine, close enough that I could see the faint scar above his eyebrow, the exhaustion he hid from everyone else. Close enough to feel the heat of him, the solid weight that was both trap and shield. "I didn't want to trap you," he said quietly, and for the first time, I heard something raw beneath the control. "I wanted to protect you. In my world, leverage is the only language people understand. It's how you keep people safe, how you keep them alive." The honesty in his voice cracked something open inside me. I realized with uncomfortable clarity that I was no longer just surviving. I was becoming part of his strategy, his world, his life. And worse, I was beginning to understand him, to see the brutal logic that had made him who he was. The power imbalance was still there. The chains of Maya's treatment, the armed guards, the cage disguised as protection. But somewhere in the past 3 months, I'd stopped seeing only the cage and started seeing the man who'd built it. "Then teach me to speak it fluently," I said, my voice steady despite the electricity crackling between us. "If leverage is the only language that matters, make me fluent." His eyes searched mine, looking for something, fear, perhaps, or resentment. Instead, he found determination, understanding, something more dangerous than either. He rolled off me, offered his hand to pull me up, but the moment lingered between us, unspoken and impossible to ignore. The physical proximity of training had sparked something neither of us could name. Tension built in the spaces between combat drills and strategy sessions. In the way his hand lingered when correcting my stance. In the way I found myself watching him when he thought I wasn't looking. It was complicated by everything. The power he held over Maya's life, the shared trauma of that night at the restaurant, The fundamental impossibility of anything real existing between captor and captive. But it was there nonetheless. Growing. Undeniable. And in the war that was coming, that complication might be the most dangerous weapon of all. The intelligence came through on a Tuesday morning, delivered by one of Kongdae's analysts, a quiet woman named Jean who spoke in data points and probabilities. Christina's hosting a charity gala. 2 weeks from Friday. The Drake Hotel. Black tie. She's positioning herself as your grieving widow and legitimate successor to your territories. I watched Kongdae's jaw tighten as Jean displayed the invitation on the monitor, elegant script announcing a fundraiser for children's cancer research. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. She's making her move, he said quietly. Consolidating support. This is where she'll try to legitimize the coup. It's also where she's vulnerable, I said, studying the guest list Jean had obtained. Public event. Witnesses. She can't afford obvious violence. Kongdae turned to me, and I saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. You're thinking infiltration. I'm thinking I'm the perfect Trojan horse. The plan formed as I spoke, audacious and terrifying. She thinks I'm a waitress who saved you once. Disposable. Insignificant. What if I approach her people? Tell them I'm desperate, that you used me and threw me away once the heat died down. Jin's eyebrows rose. That's extremely risky. It's also believable, Kongdae said slowly. In their world, powerful men use and discard people constantly. They'd expect it. I nodded. I'll offer intelligence, your location, security protocols, routines. Say, I need money for Maya's continued treatment now that you've cut off funding. They'll believe it because it's exactly what they'd do in my position. They'll also kill you the moment you're no longer useful. His voice was flat, but I heard the undercurrent of something else.
Concern, maybe.
Or the pragmatic unwillingness to lose an asset. Not if I'm wearing a wire. Not if we use it to gather confirmation of every conspirator before we strike. I met his gaze. You taught me to speak the language of leverage. Let me use it. The planning took 4 days. Kongdae coached me extensively. How to appear desperate without overplaying it, how to feed misinformation that sounded authentic, how to read a room for threats. We practiced my story until it became second nature. Kongdae had used me to survive the restaurant attack, kept me locked away for weeks, then discarded me once he'd extracted everything useful. Now Maya's treatment was being discontinued, and I had nowhere else to turn. Sell the betrayal, he said during one session. Make them feel your anger. They need to believe you hate me. That shouldn't be hard, I replied, though the words rang hollow. The truth was more complicated. Somewhere in the past 3 months, hate had transmuted into something I couldn't name. Making contact was easier than expected. One of the restaurant staff I'd identified, the blonde server from the private dining room, was still in Christina's network. I approached her at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park, my performance letter perfect. I need to speak with Christina. I have information about Kongdae. Location, security, everything. But I want money. My sister's treatment, he cut it off. I let my voice crack.
Please. I'm desperate.
The server studied me with cold calculation, then made a call. 2 days later, I sat across from Christina, capon herself in a private room at a restaurant in River North. She looked immaculate as ever, though I noticed the tension around her eyes. The past 3 months underground had cost her. The little waitress, she said, her accent thicker than I remembered. I wondered what happened to you. Kongdae's mystery savior. He used me. I injected bitterness into my voice, thinking of every coaching session, every careful word Kongdae had taught me. Kept me locked in his penthouse for weeks. Interrogated me. Then threw me out once he got what he needed. And now my sister. I let tears well up, genuine fear for Maya making them real. The treatment he promised is being discontinued. She'll die without it. Christina's smile was sharp. And You want to sell him out for money. How deliciously poetic. I want my sister to live. That's all I've ever wanted. She leaned back, studying me. The microphone hidden in my bra felt like it was burning against my skin. What information do you have? I fed her the carefully crafted misinformation. Kongdae's supposed new location, his reduced security detail, his schedule for the next 2 weeks. All of it designed to sound authentic while leading her people into traps. He's vulnerable right now, I said. He lost people in the restaurant. His network is fractured. You could strike. Oh, I intend to. Christina's eyes glittered. At the gala, I'm going to present myself as his widow and consolidate everything he built. But having confirmation of his location beforehand, she smiled. That's insurance. I need 50,000. For Maya's treatment, you'll get 20 now. 30 after the gala, once I've confirmed your information is accurate. She leaned forward. And Brenda? If you're lying to me, your sister won't just lose her treatment. She'll lose everything. Do we understand each other? I nodded, letting her see my fear. It wasn't hard. The fear was real, just not for the reasons she thought. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. Christina introduced me to 2 of her key conspirators, Marco's brother seeking revenge, and a rival underboss hoping to claim Kongdae's territory. Each one confirmed their involvement, their plans, their positions. The microphone captured everything. When I finally left, my legs were shaking so badly, I could barely walk. One of Kongdae's people, a man named Chun who'd been posing as a restaurant patron, fell into step beside me 2 blocks away. You did well, he said quietly. The boss is listening. He heard everything. I made it to the extraction vehicle before the adrenaline finally crashed. Kongdae was waiting inside, his expression unreadable as he studied me. Every word was perfect, he said. You convinced her completely. I nodded, unable to speak. The performance had required every ounce of skill and courage I developed over 3 months of transformation. 2 weeks, Kongdae continued. At the gala, we end this. 2 weeks until I'd have to perform one more time. Until the trap we'd built would finally close. The gown was midnight blue, designer, fitted perfectly to a body that had transformed over 3 months of training. Christina's people had delivered it with shoes, jewelry, and a clutch, every detail designed to make me look like I belonged among Chicago's elite. The wire was sewn into the boning of the bodice, invisible and essential. I stood in the lobby of the Drake Hotel, watching black cars discharge passengers in evening wear. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, an atmosphere of wealth and carefully concealed violence. Just like the Gilded Lotus had been 3 months and a lifetime ago. You're clear to enter. Chen's voice crackled in my nearly invisible earpiece. Boss says stay calm. We have you covered. I walked into the ballroom and felt the weight of every eye that didn't know they should be watching me. The space was magnificent. Vaulted ceilings, massive chandeliers, tables draped in white and gold. Chicago's criminal elite mingled with champagne flutes, their tuxedos and gowns hiding the blood on their hands. I recognized faces from the intelligence briefs, underbosses, money launderers, politicians on various payrolls. And scattered throughout, nearly invisible, were Kongdae's people. The security guard by the east entrance. 3 servers among the catering staff. The couple near the bar, who were actually Jean, and one of the tactical team members. A small army hidden in plain sight. I took my assigned seat at a table near the stage, exactly where Christina had placed me, close enough to watch, far enough to be insignificant. The other guests at my table barely acknowledged me. A waitress playing dress-up. Beneath their notice. I was no longer invisible, but they didn't know that yet. They would. Christina made her entrance 20 minutes later, stunning in a white gown that suggested widow and victor simultaneously. She worked the room with practiced grace, accepting condolences for her late husband, with just the right amount of grief. I watched her performance with new eyes, seeing the calculation beneath every gesture. When she took the stage, the room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice carrying perfectly. "We're here to honor the memory of my beloved husband, Park Kang-dae, and to continue his legacy of—" "That's remarkably presumptuous for someone who ordered my death." The voice came from the back of the ballroom, cold and caring. Every head turned. Kang-dae stood in the entrance, very much alive, flanked by armed men who'd materialized from positions throughout the room. He was dressed in a black suit that made him look like death incarnate, his shoulder fully healed, his expression carved from ice. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Christina's face went white, then red with rage. "Kill him," she screamed. Her bodyguards moved, but they were too slow. Kang-dae's people were already in motion, the security guards revealing weapons, the servers dropping trays to draw guns, guests who weren't really guests blocking exits. A bodyguard lunged toward the stage, trying to reach Christina. I moved on pure instinct and 3 months of training, rose from my chair, grabbed the champagne bottle from the ice bucket, and swung it into the side of his head. He went down hard. I took his gun before he hit the floor. The ballroom became a battlefield. Gunfire, controlled, precise, nothing like the chaos of a restaurant. Kang-dae's people had planned this down to the second. Christina's conspirators were neutralized with surgical efficiency. Marco's brother, dead before he could draw his weapon. The rival underboss, taken down by 2 shots from Jean. The politician trying to flee, stopped by Chun at the exit. Through it all, Kang-dae walked toward the stage with the inevitability of a guillotine falling. His men cleared a path. Christina backed away, her perfect mask finally shattering into terror. "You are always better at planning than executing," Kang-dae said, his voice cutting through the screams. "The restaurant should have taught you that." "This isn't over," Christina started.
Yes.
"It is." The confrontation was swift and final. Christina's carefully constructed coup disintegrated in minutes. Her allies were dead or being dragged away by Kang-dae's people. The criminal elite who'd come to witness her coronation now witnessed her complete destruction. I stood among the wreckage in my midnight blue gown, no longer invisible, no longer powerless. Just another weapon in Kang-dae's arsenal. One that had proven exceptionally effective. When his eyes found mine across the ballroom, something passed between us. Acknowledgement. Understanding. Partnership forged in blood and survival. The woman who'd once poured wine had become someone else entirely. 18 months later, I stood in Kang-dae's rebuilt headquarters, no longer a penthouse fortress, but a legitimate office building that housed both his legal and illegal operations. I wore a tailored suit that commanded respect, my hair pulled back in a style that meant business. Maya's latest test results sat on my desk. Full remission. She was thriving at the prestigious private school we'd enrolled her in, making friends, living the life I'd once thought impossible. She asked fewer questions now. Had learned, as I had, that some truths were better left unexamined. The shipment cleared customs. I reported to Kang-dae, who stood by the windows overlooking Chicago. And the alderman's people confirmed the zoning variants. "We're clear to break ground next month." He nodded, turning to face me. Over 18 months, our dynamic had evolved into something neither of us had expected. Not quite equals. Power imbalances like ours didn't disappear, but partners. He relied on my ability to see what others missed, to move through elite spaces and gather intelligence. I'd become his strategist, his observer, the one who saw every piece on the board before the game was played. "You have the briefing on the Rossi family?" he asked. "On your desk. They're vulnerable. 3 key defections in the last month. I'd recommend moving in the next 2 weeks." Something flickered in his expression, respect, perhaps, or the complex emotion that had grown between us through shared trauma and survival. We'd never named it, this thing that existed in the space between captor and captive, between necessity and choice. Maybe we never would. Dinner tonight? He asked. There's a new restaurant in River North, supposed to have excellent wine. I smiled, dark and knowing. Will there be dessert? There's always dessert. I was no longer the woman who once poured wine and went unnoticed, who'd been invisible in a world of powerful people. I was seen now.
Feared.
Powerful in a world that had tried to make me disappear. And standing beside Park Kong-dae, ruling an empire built on blood and survival and an understanding that transcended the chains that had first bound us, I'd found something I never expected. Not freedom, that had died the night I passed him that note, but power.
Purpose.
A place at a table where I was no longer serving, but being served. The transformation was complete. And if you're hooked on the story, hit that subscribe button and like this video. I post new emotional, dramatic love stories every day, and you don't want to miss the next one.